Generational wealth. It's one of those ideas that sounds huge, almost mythical. The idea of building something that supports not just you, but your kids and their kids too. But how in the world do you actually architect something like that? Well, it turns out it's not really about luck, and it's not just about earning a ton of money. So today, we're going to dive into a framework for how you can visually map out a financial future that actually lasts.
And that really brings us to the biggest question of all, the one that frames this entire explainer. If this idea is so powerful, if the goal is so clear, why is it so incredibly rare? Why doesn't everyone have it? Well, the answer, as it turns out, probably isn't what you think. It has a lot less to do with how much money you're making and everything to do with how you see it.
Okay, let's really dig into this quote because it goes against almost everything we're normally told. The most useful advice isn't about scrounging up another $1,000 to invest. It's about finding the money they're already losing, the money that's leaking out through the cracks of a fragmented system. It's about reclaiming what's already yours just by finally seeing how all the pieces connect. And this leads us straight into what's called the fragmentation problem. And it's such a fascinating idea, right? That you can be doing all the right things, checking all the boxes you're supposed to, and still end up falling short. Why? Because none of those individual actions are actually talking to each other. They're all living in their own little worlds.
I mean, think about how this usually works. First, you go meet with your financial advisor. You set up a retirement account, maybe you get an insurance policy. It feels productive, right? You're taking action. That's one piece of the puzzle. Then, tax season rolls around. So, off you go to your accountant. You look at last year's numbers, you file your return, and boom, you're done. You move on. That's another piece, completely disconnected from the conversation you had with your advisor. And finally, you talk to a lawyer. You get your will drawn up, maybe do some estate planning, and this feels super responsible, a real long-term move. And that's the third, totally separate piece of your financial world. So here's the kicker. Each one of these steps feels like progress, and on their own, they are. They're necessary things to do, but when they're all done in their own little silos, without any kind of unifying strategy, what you end up with is a fragmented system that completely misses the bigger picture.
So what is this bigger picture that we keep missing? Well, it's this incredibly complex web of how everything interacts. Things like your tax strategy, how you've structured your debt, your legal setup, any corporate entities you might have, and your succession plan. These aren't separate topics at all. They're all tangled together. A decision you make over here is going to have ripple effects everywhere else. So if fragmentation is the problem, then the solution has to be integration. And this is where we get this really powerful new idea, a map for your money. Think of it as a whole new way to see your entire financial world, not as a bunch of loose parts, but as one single working system. And just listen to the language here. It's not a plan or a portfolio, it's a visual architecture. This map is designed to give you total, absolute clarity. It lets you see exactly where you are, where you're going, and, this is the most important part, how every single decision you make impacts the entire structure. And this quote just nails it. This shows you how big of a shift this really is. Because once you have that map, once you can actually see how your legal structure affects your taxes and how that impacts your estate, you just can't go back. It's impossible to go back to making those isolated one-off decisions. Your whole perspective has changed for good.
So the big question is, how do you actually build this map? The good news is it's not some secret handshake just for the super rich. It's laid out as a learnable 4-stage framework that's designed to build a legacy that can actually last for generations. Okay, so the framework breaks down into 4 really clear stages. First up is to see it. This is about learning to spot opportunities and leaks that you were totally blind to before. Second, you build it. This is where you actually architect your own unique visual map. Third, you've got to maintain it, because this thing is alive. It has to grow and adopt as your life changes. And finally, and this is maybe the most crucial step of all, you pass it on, making sure the next generation is ready to be a good steward of this wealth, not just someone who inherits it.
All right, so you've built your map. It looks perfect on paper, but how do you know if it's actually strong? How is it going to hold up when life gets messy? This brings us to the final concept, the ultimate clarity test. The whole point of this test is to be proactive instead of reactive. It's all about putting some hypothetical pressure on your financial map to find the weak spots before a real crisis comes along. Because when you find those cracks ahead of time, you get to keep your power to choose instead of being forced into a corner later.
So, what kind of pressure are we even talking about here? Well, there are three really critical scenarios. First is timing pressure. Think a sudden job loss or a big life change you didn't see coming. Then there's tax pressure, maybe a sudden change in tax law, or you're forced to withdraw money from an account. And finally, liquidity pressure. All your assets are tied up, but you need a whole lot of cash right now. A really robust system can handle these shocks. A fragmented one, it'll often just fall apart.
And this is the result of that test. This is the aha moment. It's when someone sees their own financial map under pressure for the first time and a hidden weakness that was invisible before is suddenly obvious. It's that instant when all the complexity just melts away into crystal clarity. And that moment, right there, that's the whole point.
So let's end this explainer by turning this powerful idea back to you. Now that you've seen how a fragmented approach can totally undermine even our best intentions, the most important question you can probably ask yourself is this: where is your financial system quietly breaking down, and what opportunities are you losing in those gaps?